collaboratively with the first people of this land. Thus, we want to recognize Indigenous people as the original stewards of the land and the perennial relationship they have with their traditional territories. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As I said earlier, we do have a pretty full day. We have the agenda, which I will just quickly share with you on my screen. We'll start at 9:30 with the acknowledgement, which we just did, and the welcoming remarks. And we're a little bit earlier, but that's okay because that gives us a little bit of leeway anywhere where we might need it. We will be starting our speaker session with our keynote speaker, Jenny Horstman, and then it'll follow with a break. At about 10:30, we'll come back for our first session, and then we'll have a break after our first session. Our second session will be at about 11:35, and then we will close it off with a poll towards the end. We will remind everybody we will have a poll during our Q&A and our closing remarks. So I hope everybody is ready for a wonderful symposium on creating space for curiosity and healing. I'd like to introduce to you our first keynote speaker. And I'll stop sharing that for now. Give me one moment, please, so I can open it. I don't have to put it on the screen. So Jenny Horstman, our keynote speaker, Dr. Jenny Horstman, I apologize. For more than 30 years, Dr. Horstman has been asking questions about how violence affects what and where and how we learn. By violence, she understands anything that diminishes us or makes us wrong, including racism, sexism, ableism, and so much more injustice and judgment deeply interwoven in society's systems. Over the years, she has focused intensely on exploring ways educational environments in all their forms can create conditions to increase the possibility for more fruitful learning and teaching. She has spoken and taught widely across North America and internationally in diverse forums, working with educators, administrators, counselors, learners, and parents. She has carried out research and written books, articles, manuals, and websites, usually in collaboration with others. Throughout her work, she has always focused on the brilliance of our survival systems. She has seen that what we've learned and what our learners and teachers understand how violence affects our learning and teaching, there is less blame passed around, leaving more space for curiosity, creativity, and new stories to emerge. She also rides a bike, gardens, and remakes and re-images things other people throw away, especially broken mirrors. She sees these activities as deeply connected to her belief that nothing and no one needs to simply fix. She sees endless possibilities to create new patterns and for individuals, communities, and sometimes even systems to grow and change. Please welcome Dr. Jenny Horstman.
Thank you so much, Georgina. I'm really glad to be here today and just delighted to see so many of you across the country. Absolutely your choice whether you have your video on or not, but I have to say, I certainly do enjoy seeing more of who I'm speaking to if you're comfortable with it. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. You know, there I am saying I'd love to see you, but I will disappear into a small square as I as I share. So feel free to make your own choice. Let's hope this is right. Yes. I should tell you that I have two screens. So if I look like I'm looking away, I'm looking to my separate screens, and wanting to remind myself of many different details. Are you seeing my slides at a reasonable size? Awesome.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you see my my opening. I've called it bringing our most joyous selves as fully as we can into our work and lives today. And each of those words was carefully chosen. Even in the midst of the discord, in so many challenges and struggles in this world, I really believe that joy is what will make the possibilities shift. I say as fully as we can, wanting also just to acknowledge we can only do what we can do in any particular moment. And when we push for more than we can do, we create problems rather than joy, rather than possibility. And I added even today, because I want to say that what we can do today is different from what we can do tomorrow. The conditions are always changing, even in the smallest, subtlest ways. And so that's part of the frame I want to offer today as we begin to explore together. And I will stay on all morning to hear what others say, and so we can come back to questions for all of us at the end. But for me, curiosity and spaciousness is at the heart of what can make a difference for us. And I have to add just a little bit. We began with a beautiful and thoughtful land acknowledgement, and I just want to add to that a little. I'm here in Toronto too, and the image on this slide I love because it is the wampum, the dish with one spoon wampum, that invites a sharing, ways of creating space alongside each other. This land, I also really want to acknowledge the ways in which it has been and in a place for Indigenous peoples of many different nations, a meeting place, as well as this meaning of Tiktaranto, the Mohawk word for a place where the trees are standing in the water. I'm a white settler, a first-generation immigrant, slowly learning about all the levels of harm in this land. And sort of ironic, I chose this land with delight fleeing England, and slowly I'm realizing both the levels of harm that Canada has done and that England did in this land I now call home. I think a lot about harm and recognizing all the complexities of harm in so many ways. And of course, I don't know what your history is. I don't know what land, whether you are somebody who fled or whose ancestors fled another land, perhaps fleeing violence and harm there to make home here. I don't know whether you are somebody whose family has been here since time immemorial. We each have our own histories, our own joys, our own sorrows. And today, of course, we're creating a virtual space as we connect in from different places. But it's important to me that we acknowledge all, just at least in a moment, all the different forms of harm that have shaped our personal and broader histories and continue to shape. So much harm is ongoing. And I think of this as a place, this time, as a place in the water, a fork in the river, when we can look, we in our different locations, our different identities, can look at how we rethink, how we how we shift from damage. Just yesterday, I heard a beautiful words from Bell Hooks quoted in a webinar I was in, and the reminder was that love, we need love instead of fear. That love is the only way we end domination and oppression. So I start us out with that invitation: space, curiosity, love over fear. And just a few words of the journey I hope you'll go on with me together this morning. I really look forward to having questioning our usual ways of looking. I'm going to take you on a journey around the nervous system. Some of you have heard me a lot in the last few years, and I am really set on how important understanding the nervous system is to our possibilities for change. I want to help us remember what we already know and imagine different ways of thinking, and get ready to try different things filled with that spacious curiosity. I really also have to acknowledge that, as you heard in the intro, my whole working life has been about the impact of violence, all forms of violence, and the way they can shape us. And particularly, they shape us into so many of the things we call mental illness. They impact what we call our mental health. And increasingly, I'm really aware of even the subtlest violences and the harm they can do. So, and of course, all of the systemic injustices. So here's the journey I want to go on with you. And I need to move along a little faster, but I want to ask you just to notice for a moment. Let's take a couple of big sighs together, and feel free to either unmute yourselves or stay muted, but let's just take a big sigh. Might even want some sound in that sigh. So, and as you sigh, maybe you even notice, maybe you connect to your body, your thoughts, your feelings in that moment of pause. And if so, it's not easy for many of us. Sometimes we are cut off at the head, and it's only our thoughts we can connect to, or only our flow of feelings, or only our body. But what information, is there any information it gives you of one tiny little thing you might do that might shift to make you more able to travel with me on this journey this morning? Maybe it's a tiny little thing. Maybe it helps you to roll your shoulders, or look out the window away from the screen, or perhaps you have a cat or a dog nearby, and just a moment of stroking will bring you just a little more present. I suppose a key point I'm going to make really throughout this session, and I want to just bring us to, is that little things, little moments, they aren't little. Every tiny shift we make in our angle of view, in what we do, what we invite others to do, can be enormous. And each tiny one can multiply in ways that is almost impossible to believe. And yet I have seen it again and again and again. And so easily, I think we dismiss the small things, especially the things that we decided were a little silly, or we don't do now we're grown up. And yet that playfulness can be an antidote to what is so strong in this society. We have such a strong frame about fixing. Really front and center these days is so much talk about mental health and mental illness, particularly since COVID. And it's very much the language, the weights of practice that we use in this society at this time in history. And yet in other parts of the world, At other times, we've had patterns of behavior that are firmly labeled these days here would be understood completely differently. And this is a framework that has come to the fore, that is what we think of just as fact, really. It allows us to see many things, but it also obscures other patterns that we may not notice quite as much. This society tends to see individuals very much in isolation, in what's wrong with us. And some of you come from cultures that push in different ways, and focus always on connections, and connections to all living beings, connections to communities, and help us move away from some of these individual solutions. That individual solution framing also often takes us away from what leads to our patterns of behavior, and can lead us to this real focus on fixing. I should just, they should just, why don't they? We can lose in that way the gentle witnessing, the space for curiosity. The labels can certainly help us. They can mobilize us. They can give us drugs that are vital for some ease. They can help us understand our struggles in a bigger picture, tell us that we're not alone. But they can also leave us lost, feeling a little wrong. And most importantly to me, stop us valuing ways that we have work to survive. So here's a little of the spaciousness for me. The wound is where the light enters in. There is possibility. The Rumi quote reminds us that places of hurt and damage can be very tender places. We don't want to be harsh with tender places. We don't want to dig at a wound. We want to treat it gently. And they can also be a place where new knowledge comes in. There is wisdom gained in untenable places. And I really believe in honoring that wisdom. The Leonard Cohen quote, you might say it's, almost says the same thing. But for me, it also reminds us that a crack can be a crack in our certainties, in our sure belief of our story, of our understanding of ourselves, of others, of what's wrong, and who's right. And I'm inviting to look through the cracks today. In this society, we tend to throw away what is cracked and broken. And as you know, you heard at the beginning, I'm pretty fixed on how we find the beauty in the cracked things, the broken things, instead of trying to fix the symptoms of our dis-ease. And name our patterns always as disorders. If we shift our angle of view just a tiny bit, we can see the brilliant survival strategies that we have brought in. So, as I say yet again, curiosity, what we've learned, what we've already know, what we know brought us ease, perhaps even as little ones or at some earlier stage in our life. But even the strangest things we or others do, we can describe them as the behavior, sort of evidence of our wounds. Perhaps also they are evidence of the inner wisdom that we do know what helps us heal, what helps us find just enough ease for new possibilities. So curiosity, and this is why I have to say more about nervous systems, depending on what state we're in, curiosity may be almost impossible to reach. Before I go into just a little bit of detail about the nervous system, I want to talk just a little bit more about mental health. This image here is courtesy of Dan Siegel and some of his wise and, I think, brilliant work. Although the actual image is courtesy of Susan Tihonen, an artist I often work with. The typo that some of you might spot is courtesy only to me and my lack of noticing looking at it over a great length of time. But I think being stuck on the problem of that typo is the very rigidity that it's describing. So I just want to detour a moment to talk about Dan's image of mental health. And he says, when we are in gorgeous mental health, we are like that hedgehog in the boat in the river. We are in the flow, we're in the current. We know we're not fully in control. We have some paddles to steer ourselves a little. We are in the flow. We all get snagged when the conditions around us catch us up, catch us in many complicated ways. We can get caught in the rocks, and there we want control and rigidity, or we can get lost in the reeds and caught in chaos. And part of what I love about Dan's description, his wisdom, is that he says we all get caught. And if we can, we push off. We find the resources, we find what's possible, we find how to engage to get us back into the flow when we can, as soon as we can. But sometimes, of course, we get stuck. And he argues that every mental illness we have a label for in this society is speaking about being caught on one bank or the other, or sometimes a flip between them. There's brilliance, and yet there's stuckness in something like obsessive compulsive disorder, stuck in rigidity, the chaos and altered reality when the reality around us has become unbearable, seems so unsafe. That altered reality may look pretty chaotic, and it too is a altered reality we often call psychosis and have many names for, but it's protective. And so just noticing that there's not a great divide, there's a flow, there's a movement, and we can find our ways in. So here we are. We can shift. This is my pull, my invitation is to shift from thinking just about individuals to our broader conditions, to thinking about not symptoms, but survival strategies, and really trying to begin from what's right rather than what's wrong. So in this society, I have to say, sometimes we even talk about our nervous systems as wrong, as if they too they're out of date. And I want to say, no, they weren't just designed for fleeing the tigers. They really are designed to keep us alive. And I want to invite us to really befriend our nervous system, to notice where it helps us, notice where we can make shifts, and notice that often the stories we tell are out of the physical reactions of our nervous system. So I'm going to do just a brief little detour to think about our nervous system. And the piece that is really crucial that I want to convey today is this idea that our nervous system is always checking for cues of safety. It's not our perception, it's not what we're aware of, it's our neuroception is the word that's used to describe it. Outside our conscious control, our nervous system is saying, is it safe? Is it safe now? Is it safe? And it's checking inside our body. Am I breathing fast? Is there something that's suggesting a lack of safety? Is my heart racing? Outside, what are these conditions out there in every way? What am I looking at nonstop? What am I noticing? What am I feeling as I notice all the outside? And as I say, not consciously, the nervous system is just checking. It's also noticing other beings around us, noticing, I seem to think the sky is falling, but that cat beside me is flopped as if there is just nothing to be on alert for. Nervous systems give each other messages. Huh, maybe safer than I thought. What else? Start checking all over again. So that, I think, is really important because it can shift us from judgment of ourselves or of others. Can't always get there, but it can, if we keep coming back to us, it can remind us that these cues that our nervous system is bringing up are what sends us to fight and flight, and fawn and freeze. So, gives us clues to ourselves and to others. So I've got some quite filled slides here, and I am going to share my slides with you. So I'm not going to talk slowly through them, but I just want to really, the point I really want to make here is that when our nervous system sets us off for fight and flight, it's there in our physicality, and then we can tell stories about it, tell stories about other people and how unreasonable they are, or how, what's wrong with them or us. But it's a physical reaction, and we need to change things if we want that reaction to shift. It can be as tiny things we change, and I'll talk more about that in the next little section. And certainly, we need these reactions. We are often in parts of them, not full on. I need some anger to fight for change, to say, this is not okay. I need some speed and some sense of a desire to move away, to move myself from things that hurt me. And if we're always activated, because that's where our history has taken us to be acutely aware of the lack of safety in so many little moments, a tone of voice, perhaps tone of the light even, then we are wanting then to look at, what can I change? What can I change now? What tiny thing? If we're activated a lot of the time, and I don't use the language dysregulated, because that says there's something wrong. I'm not dysregulated. I'm activated from cues, and now I want to shift the cues. Now, if it's big, if we've had a lot, especially if we've had experienced violences all our lives, we may very quickly go into the next version of making ourselves safe, where our dorsal vagus nerve, not that we really need the names of it, but we know the feeling of shutdown. We know the feeling of when we sort of are trying to make ourselves small, we're apologizing for ourselves. I realize now how often I've heard that from literacy learners, from upgrading students, that, oh, I'm so sorry, we do that. We do that to keep ourselves safe. It's, again, useful. And when even that fails, we close down. And for some of us, numb and close down can be frequent and easy and often. So the challenge, too, is when we're in those places a lot of the time, we may not look like a bother to anybody else. We may be very quiet, very pleasant to others, but our ordinary systems aren't working because we're in survival mode. Then that's when we have digestive problems, and we have all sorts of physical problems because we're so rigid. We're taking tiny breaths and barely moving. So we have to find our ways out of that road. And you guessed it, I'm going to say yet again, tiny, tiny things will move us up from numb to activated to this beautiful state. One that we don't even talk about as much. It's become ordinary and commonplace to talk about fight and flight and freeze. But we don't talk as often about this one, this state. It's the other part of the vagus nerve, the part that's at the front of us, that dorsal one that closes us down is the one behind us. This one's out front. And I sometimes think of it as just, it's like our window on the world. If we can reach this place, even for a moment, it's the one that helps us feel connected, curious, compassionate. I think it's the state when people will say, oh, they're so resilient, because it's the state that you know it, that state when, oh, things can go wrong and I can say, it's okay. I can roll with it. I don't berate myself. Oh, stupid, stupid, stupid. Why didn't I? There's that anger. I don't blame others and just be furious at what others have done wrong. I can just say, hi, all right, what will I try next? So that's a state that we can really hope to find our way into. And of course, here I am again. We find our way there by tiny things that we can change on the outside, on the inside, and in between. I may feel a whole lot better if I just have a conversation with somebody who's calm themselves, or share a hug. Maybe I don't even need words. What can I change? What can I change? And we'll talk just a little bit more about that in a few moments. But before I get there, just want to come back to that earlier image that reminded us about the flow. And here's one more of my things I just will keep saying and that I hope will echo in your head after I finish talking. Nothing is bad or good. Everything serves us in the moment. And then we're looking for the ways that we can create movement and get out of stuckness. Chaos is not only chaos, it's also fertile space for creativity. It's out of chaos that we create, we imagine new possibilities. Control, rigidity, also the space for useful systems and order that we may want also a little bit of a shift. We move in and out of all of these states all day long, day by day, when we're not completely stuck. We can be aroused in fierceness about something. We can be frozen and numb. What's the point? I give up. The world's coming to an end where nothing I can do, sort of feeling. Young girl said that to me just the other day, and I thought, what can I say to help her come out of that shutdownness that often connects to our own past or present tough experiences in a racist, classist, homophobic world, or our past experiences. And yet, where can we find those moments for openness, for balance, for flow? Where can we find possibilities of harm reduction? We talk about harm reduction in relation to drugs. I want to take it for everything we do. That habit I have that maybe my New Year's resolution said, I'm going to quit that one. How does it reduce harm for us? I have a next door neighbor I always see smoking, and she's full of apologies for it. And just last night we talked about how, but maybe it's harm reduction. What does it help you for? Some harm reduction has its costs. Maybe it's possible to shift it a little. Maybe it's possible to minimize the harm to others, to ourselves. But always looking for just tiny pieces of flow, of shift. So back to that inside, outside, between. I have another little image of it. I know it may seem very small in the state of the world, the state of discord, and so many pressures in our personal lives, our families, our communities, the country, the world, violence to our people, all of the conditions we live within. There are huge things that we can despair of changing. And there are also tiny things that may give us just a little more ease to be with the huge things, to see the tiny cracks, I want to say again, cracks in the difficulties in this world that we can shift. Also, if we name and acknowledge what is hard, then we can look at the little possibilities. And even if we can't change much, at least we recognize it. We can avoid being so harsh on ourselves and saying, something wrong with me that I'm not making these big changes, when actually I'm living with really hard things that I am surviving brilliantly. So I can't make big changes now, but perhaps next week, next month, next year, something more is possible. The honesty allows us to bring tenderness, I think, with ourselves, with others, and with a recognition of the conditions, that it's community conditions, not just individuals. And we can notice where we're going to put our attention. For instance, I've been finding the violence in the world, the wars, just the loss and damage and harm almost, makes me just want to go back to bed. I've spent my whole lifetime working on violence, and sometimes I wonder whether we're only going in worse and worse directions. But I realized I can put my attention in different places. I can pay more attention, for instance, to the people doing amazing peace work. And when I put my energy there, I start to see so many small and large acts of courage, of love, to create change. And I find that helps me to keep looking for each little thing I can do. Just tiny things have ripples that spread outward. So in the next little bit, I just want to touch a tiny bit on some of those things we can do. Going from the large to the small, and I think that is part of what we have to do, is keep in our own minds and hearts, keep moving backwards and forwards from the little picture of just my body, my being, out and out and out to ourselves in the world, in the universe, and back in and out. And so I go to the smallest thing, the most local little thing we can do, just as I began with a sigh. A sigh is a beautiful way to bring our system down. It brings, whereas the in-breath is the down, the sigh is the down, the calming one, the one that may even just in a moment take us into that ventral vagal, that window on the world that feels a little more possible. It allows us to feel change as we breathe in and out. And each one of us will find different things that help us to feel just a little more ease. I hate square breathing personally. I feel boxed in by it. And I said that to a friend a couple of days ago, and she said, oh, I love it. It just calms and centers me. There we are. Each one of us is different. We all want to tell other people, oh, that's the answer for you. Might be, but it might not be. So if we can offer things with the possibilities we've tried, and really crucially, I think some of the oldest wisdom is often about connecting with each other, doing things together, finding ways to laugh, to connect, And so, that can make a difference to us to connect. So there's breath. There's one of the tiny, tiny things we can do in any moment. And we can just try things and see if anything sings for us in a moment, or into a bigger practice, like a mindfulness practice. But each one of us is different as to what might be useful to us in our being and around us. So here we are. We can also think about sights and sounds. And again, too, there's a mix here of smaller and larger things. And even in this moment right now, again, you might look out the window and for me, I look out the window and I see trees and a little bit of sunshine, and I can say, perhaps also out of that, I can think, I need to schedule a day soon to be out in nature, to see, or maybe I can go right then. I always laugh. A friend told me a little while ago that she was feeling absolutely overwhelmed. There was too much going on. There was so much in her life, her work, her family. And she decided the change she needed was to do a course in singing and join a choir. And she said, "You'll think I'm nuts." And I said, "No, that might be absolutely what you need. If you try it, you'll find out." So the importance of us letting ourselves remember that it could be the absolute opposite of what everyone around us tells us is logical. There's the small things and the large things. Excuse me. I go next to touch, because within that are also large and small things, all sorts of versions of thinking about touch. And so many things can shift our nervous system just enough out of some of the basics of how our nervous system has calibrated itself for this intense world that we are in. Tiny things can change. Even right now, I invite you to just try, rub one thumb on the other hand, perhaps, or rub your hands on your thighs. Oh, just gently, and see if they bring you down a moment. Again, so many small or large things. Maybe you want to learn a whole practice of tapping or havening, one of these things that you can find lots of information about. You may have friends who say, "That's the answer." Again, each one of us find things that make just a little more spaciousness. In that tiny experimentation, we make just a little more space for ourselves. The possibility, perhaps, of whatever practice helps you. For me, it's a habit of gardening, hands in the earth. Forget my gardening gloves that I get out every time. It's my bare hands in the soil that makes a difference to me. Each one of us is different. Movement. Movement, again, it can be large and small things we can do in the moment, or things that eventually create a practice for us. In this moment, I might just roll my shoulders to calm my own energy. I wanted an active energy to connect with you, even when I'm only looking at a lot of names. And I want a little calm to remember the important points I want to make. For me, I've really developed a practice, a habit of cycling. Fierce, hard, strong cycling is what calms my nervous system. For many, it's a calmer, gentler movement that will settle enough to see what things can be changed outside, inside, with who I connect with nearby. In that just a little shift, then becomes the possibility of the next shift and the next shift. I have a beautiful story of somebody who actually teaches body work. When her son was tiny, he would wail and wail and wail. And she used to try all sorts of calming things that just didn't settle him. And one day she just picked him up in her arms, held him in a big hug, and ran and ran. A minute or so later, he was laughing and laughing. She'd met his fierce energy with fierceness, and change was possible. And there are dogs in each of these images just to remind me, to remind you what so many people learned during COVID, that animals can also, they can be the connection that allows us to calm ourselves. So, well, even in this moment, maybe you can find a tiny, tiny moment of spaciousness. Maybe in any moment, you can just find that tiny moment. And when you can't, perhaps you can find tenderness with the self that is keeping you safe in that moment, or tenderness with the other who is there in that moment, who cannot shift yet until some conditions shift. One more thing that can sometimes help us shift is some sort of repetitive activity. Maybe we know folks who rock. Sometimes we put labels on patterns of behavior lead to very strong, repetitive behaviors, repetitive movements. Sometimes we laugh at other people's or our own repetitive movement. Over the years doing this work, I've heard the most wild variety of versions of repetitive movements that calm people. Some can be very useful, like sweeping or washing the dishes. Others are ironing. Some people love that smoothness of ironing. Some may feel less useful. But of course, if we pass no judgments and notice and don't, and just bring curiosity. At the moment, I'm obsessed with slicing up old, worn out socks and turning them into a rug. And the movement of pushing each loop over the next is satisfying and calming me and easing my desire to avoid waste. If we experiment, we can find the wildest things if we give the spaciousness that suspends judgment. Maybe we can find more means of expression for ourselves, not focusing on what's broken, but what beautiful new patterns we can make out of the wisdom learned in the difficult, untenable spaces. I've included a couple of images in this for those of you who are looking at the images. Maybe some of you have closed your eyes during all of this and just listened. Whatever is right for you, I hope you have been doing. But the images, the top one is a piece of mosaic I did out of broken glasses and dishes, and I call it Explosion of Possibility. And the one below is one I am a little in love with at the moment, because of the flow in it, a piece of beautiful artwork by Anne Breen that graces my wall now. I love its flow. Again, it's about a sense of possibility to me. And as we do create in any form that we're willing to experiment with. It might be words, it might be images, it might be sound or movement, could be things like cooking or gardening. But as we experiment with things that we create, rather than this society really pushes us into consuming, then that too will help us find shift, find ways to avoid getting stuck in the old places. So anything that allows us to shift our stories. So our nervous system activation, we justify it with story. And we say, oh, I am this angry because you are wrong and I'm right. And our nervous system sent us into anger. Maybe there's something useful in the first story we tell. Maybe there are new and other stories we can tell. Little shifts may make us different stories, because telling the same old story again and again and again is like falling in the same hole again. Maybe that's all we can do, and it will take us time to get out again. So if we can shift stories, we have much more sense of spaciousness. So as I come to the end of my time of seeing if I can spark, seeing if there's some connection between what's possible for us, I want to just reiterate again, we have brilliant inner wisdom. Many, many traditional societies have followed so many practices that have served to heal without having Western understandings of mental health. And there are many different things that we might have wanted to do that we've told ourselves are silly. We've had sort of crushed out of us by this society or our friends or families. So my invitation is to step away from that pressure, the pressure that says we're wrong, that what we're trying is foolish. Everything works for somebody. Nothing works for everyone. So trying, exploring, figuring out new possibilities is my invitation. And often I think we feel, oh, nothing helps, nothing helps. I was in that place for much of last year, and I notice we can just keep trying. We often say of our students, well, I tried and it didn't work. I did the thing that I was taught to do. And again, I will say, we just have to keep trying something else, something else, something else. It can seem that we or others are caught in absolutely unshakable patterns, and yet we can find ways out of them. So we can try the impossible. And I'm out of time, so I'm just going to finish with saying, we can always look for expansiveness. We can find possibilities in when we can find spaces of expansiveness. So I want to end with an invitation to you to always notice where you can find even the tiniest opening in the crack of stuckness. This is my view on my morning bicycle ride, my place of expansiveness. I invite you to remember yours, to be reminded how precious your own is as I finish up here. So there's just some extra final pieces of credits and for these slides and the resources, and you will get those later. And I'm a couple of minutes over, apologies, but just delighted to have been with you this morning and look forward to staying with you the rest of the morning.
Thank you so much, Jenny. What a wonderful presentation and opening for our health symposium. It really does pique the curiosity within ourselves. And thank you for all those little tips and just wonderful. We are going to take a little break now, and we will come back at about 10:30 in another 5 to 6 minutes. And we will join Renzia, who will do our first workshop. And so take a little break and
slides. I don't I don't actually read slides to people unless I am requested. So if somebody asks, will you read the slides? I absolutely will. Otherwise, I don't read them. And I don't also go bullet point by bullet point. Everything I talk about will be somewhere in the slides, and they will be distributed later through Georgina. She will be able to distribute them to you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I also like it when people talk back. So please feel free to put comments or ideas in the chat, maybe observations that you have, questions that you have. Georgina has already agreed that she will stop me mid-sentence if she needs to. If there's something that comes up in the chat that needs to be addressed or that is an interesting observation. And or maybe you have ideas that work for you that you think would be helpful for other people in the audience to hear as well. So please use the chat, and I am aiming to have some Q&A time at the end of the session. So let me get started on that. So we're talking about taking care of your mental health. So we'll talk a bit about what is your mental health. And I think, when we talk about these things, it's really important because there are a lot of misconceptions. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what is mental health. We're going to talk about perhaps some of the things that we do ourselves that we kind of get in the way of our own mental health, things that we can take control of and change to improve our mental health. And then I'm going to talk you through setting some goals. How do you set some goals? How do you stay motivated and get started on what it is that you would like to do? So what is mental health and what is mental illness? These two terms are often really confused with each other. So let's start by talking about the World Health Organization of definition of health. And I love this definition because it is so comprehensive. It covers all the aspects of our functioning in the world around us, all the aspects of functioning as human beings. And so it includes mental health, physical health, our body, our mind, our relationships with others, and experiencing that in well-being. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on also about the importance of the fact that they mention that it is not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That's a really key point also in their definition of health in general. And it's very significant. And of course, some people also would have in their spiritual health. Not everybody thinks along those lines, but that's also an aspect of our functioning that is relevant and important for many people when they think about their overall picture and their holistic understanding of who am I, how do I function, and when am I healthy in the world around me. And what we're talking, when I started out in this industry, whenever you drop the word health, people only thought about their body. Physical health was the only thing we talked about. And really, there is a more nuanced understanding of all the components that go into health. And of course, all of those components influence each other. So we talk about our physical health. With physical health is the condition of our body. How well have we taken care of it? How strong is our body? Do we have illnesses in our body? So it talks about that piece. The mental health, and I'm going to give you the definition of mental health that the World Health Organization gives, because again, it's a very beautiful and comprehensive definition. It talks about a state of well-being, so having more positive than negative emotions, and where an individual is able to realize their own potential, so that you can feel that you're effective, that you're able to achieve things, that you can cope with normal stresses of life, that you're able to function well in the world, that you have a sense of productivity and fruitfulness, that you have purpose, that you know that what you're doing makes a difference, that it is recognized, and that it has a purpose. And then finally, it includes, and I think this is also very important, it includes the contribution and the connection to community, knowing that there are people that have your back and people that you can take care of and that you can contribute to. So there's a very broad definition of mental health that has so many different aspects in it and covers a lot of those general health conditions that the World Health Organization includes in their overall condition. One of the things that is becoming more and more relevant, and that as we're understanding more and more about how our brain works, how our body works, we're also having increased understanding of cognitive health. And cognitive health is really our ability to think, to learn, and to remember. And it's a really important part of our health, our ability to take in information, to assess information. It can be as simple as understanding how to move your mouse so that you have the spatial awareness to put your cursor where you want it. That is cognitive health. And some people, when you're super tired or when you're super stressed, that is actually much harder to do. And of course, our social health are the relationships that we have with other people, the quality and the quantity of the relationships that we have. Do we have people that we trust, people that we know will be supportive, that take us and accept us for who we are with bumps and lumps and faults that we have? The purpose of this slide is just really to give you some idea of the connectedness. And I think this is something when we think for ourselves, about different aspects of our health, and we think about how we function on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that is really important to understand is that even though there's like these overall definitions of mental health, cognitive functioning, physical health, social health, what that actually looks like on a day-to-day basis is going to be different for each individual. It's going to be different for you as an individual based on your personality, on your needs, on perhaps pre-existing conditions that you have. Your culture and your cultural beliefs will affect when do you see yourself or believe that you are functioning well and that you are living your best life, that you are healthy. So that looks different for different people. And all of these aspects, not only are they unique, but they are also impact each other. And anybody that has had a rotten night of sleep, maybe the baby was crying all night or they were very worried about something, knows that, when you don't get enough sleep with your body, you're going to be much more irritable, much more frustrated and angry the next day, perhaps less motivated to participate. At the same time, you're not going to be able to process information. Doing math is harder. Anybody who's gone through that or being very stressed and then try to read a book and realize, oh my gosh, I'm reading the same sentence 3 times and I still don't really know what it says. Your cognitive functioning was affected. So there's all kinds of factors that affect each other and play into each other. And you'll find that I keep coming back to this because it also gives us the freedom to decide where do we start, and all because everything is connected. It means that we can pick those areas to make change that are the easiest and low-hanging fruit for us, because we pick the one that we can go with that will have a ripple effect. So all of these things affect each other. We know that loneliness and isolation have a tremendous impact on people's mental health. The UK actually has a government position, and it sounds strange, the Minister of Loneliness, because they've identified that in this time there is an epidemic of people feeling alone and unconnected. And that's not about that can be, you can have social relations and still feel alone and unconnected to other people. You can be on your own and still feel that you're connected with something bigger and outside of yourself. So these all things affect our functioning on a day-to-day basis and affect our health. And we often overlook this, and we also get very judgmental about how we're functioning and not realizing all of these factors that can affect where we are at a given moment. So I put this in the middle of this slide because everybody has mental health. And it's really important to know that. It's not like some people have it and some people haven't got it. We have different levels. And what I really love this is the two-dimensional model of mental health that was presented by a researcher called Keyes. And what they found is that you can have a mental illness, a disorder, a diagnosed disorder, and still live a full, wonderful life with well-being, with a sense of purpose, with a sense of achieving, a sense of coping. You can have all of those things even when you have a mental illness. And that's the top left corner where you can flourish with a diagnosis. And one of the things that I always use here is kind of like the physical parallel. You know, when you have may have diabetes. So we know maybe somebody who has diabetes and yet they can run a marathon. And then there's the next person over who doesn't have diabetes, doesn't have any diagnosed disorder or illness. And yet, you know, when they walk around the block, they're out of breath. So they are actually in the left, on the right bottom corner. They have no mental illness, and yet they have poor health. They are languishing. And so we can have the same thing both physically and mentally, where we can have a mental illness and still flourish, still have mental health, and we can have no mental illness and no disorder and yet be languishing. And there's no blame or shame. You need to understand that there's never any blame or shame about that piece. There are a lot of factors that can affect whether we're in the top corner, on the top of that quadrant with or without mental illness, or if we're in the bottom where we are languishing and struggling on our day-to-day basis. So everybody has those ups and downs and those fluctuations. Now, I do want to take a moment to talk about some of the beliefs that we have. And these beliefs that we have are based in the kind of like the unidimensional understanding. A long time, for a very long time, we thought it was one thing. You had mental illness over on one side of the continuum and mental health on the other side of the continuum. And so there's a lot of confused and very damaging and unkind and lacking in compassion beliefs. And I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there's a couple of them that I want to highlight. So one, you know, to think that that you won't be affected in your mental health is nonsense, because everybody has mental health, everybody is living a life, everybody has experiences. So yes, you have mental health, sometimes poor, sometimes not so well. People have episodes of mental illness and continue to live on and have a one-time episode. The other thing, and this is one that I really feel is really important, because this one is very damaging, and it's one that we encounter all the time in the media. You know, we love those shows where there's some psychopath or sociopath going out, killing people, raping people, doing the most horrible things. And, you know, Criminal Minds is one of the shows that I despise. I hate that show because it perpetuates a wrong stereotype about people with mental illness and mental health problems. The reality actually is that the level of violence and aggression within the population of people with mental illness is no larger, is equal to that in the general population. And not only that, but it is actually people that are struggling with mental illness are actually at a much higher risk than people in the general population to be bullied, harassed, assaulted, abused, to suffer neglect. So it's actually the other way around. They do not perpetrate violence and unpredictable behavior for people. Here are some of the other myths. We talked about this one, you know, around where you can actually be flourishing with mental illness and with mental illness. And these are ones that these two, the one about intellectual ability and about weakness and character flaws, these are very damaging to people that struggle with poor mental health and poor mental illness, because it puts a blame on them. People do not choose to have a mental illness. People do not choose to have poor mental health. And so expecting them or blaming them for being in a bad place means that they suffer in silence, that they won't seek help. And you're adding insult to injury when you perpetrate that stigma and that myth that they should just snap out of it and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. If they just did this and if they just did that, they would be so much better. That is not That's not a compassionate or a helpful position for people at all. It's help for us because it makes us feel, if you're not struggling with mental illness or poor mental health, it makes you feel good and powerful, right? It makes you feel that you're safe. But it's definitely not helpful to the people that really are struggling and that we may love and care for. So, and we've also talked, the other ones we've really addressed, and of course, children can also experience mental health problems. And this is something that we've, that there's more and more research that shows that, the impact of deprivation, the impact of childhood trauma, of loneliness and neglect on mental health for children, not just as child, but also as adults, that this forms them and carries along with them throughout their entire life. Do people have any feedback or questions about this? You can hear maybe in my voice that I'm very passionate about this piece about, the impact of perpetrating these different beliefs that are so strongly rooted in our society, and really serve to kind of protect us from our own fear of poor mental health and mental illness. So if anybody wants to put something in, please feel free to add something to the chat. I see somebody put something in the chat. Georgina, do you want to share what they put in the chat?
And they're just asking whether or not we'll have access to the PowerPoint presentation. And yes,
Yes.
it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll be distributing it, and I'll make a nice version with some notes to go with the different PowerPoint slides as well. So, okay. So let's talk about everybody has mental health. And just to maybe belabor the point a little bit for you, what I'd like you to do is take a moment for yourself to think about, where would you rate on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate your mental health this morning, today? Where was it yesterday? Where was it a month ago? Maybe you know that your mental health changes. One of the things that I know for myself, my mental health in January is always much lower than it is in March. In January, it's a dark month. It's a super busy month at work. And so by March, when the sun breaks out, when there's longer days, I can physically feel the increase and the lift in my mood. So my mental health, and I need to take measures, that it's not a passive thing, something that I've learned about myself. And so I need to do things in January to make sure that I feel better, and that it's not a huge difference between January and March. So think about it for yourself. Just take a moment to think about, well, where was I? Where was I today? Where was I yesterday? Do I have better mental health in the summer, in the fall? What happened when I had an event happen in my life? I would ask you to look at it through at least 3 different points in time and rate your mental health. And people are very good at looking back and rating their mental health kind of in hindsight as well. So
Friends,
look
yeah,
at that.
we have
Yeah.
somebody in the chat that stated, what you're saying is absolutely true. My mother said that when her mother died when she was 10, she was forever changed. My mother
Yes.
had bipolar depression.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so these life events will affect your mental health. And if you have, some life events will carry with you, right? You need to find a place for them. And this is where, I am by trade a psychologist and a psychotherapist. So I will always, advocate for that. There are definitely situations where all of the tips that I'm giving you today are not going to be enough, where perhaps we carry things forward and we need more support and help to move forward, and not to get stuck in stigma and self-blaming or being blamed by others to go and get that help that you need. But there are different points in our life, things that can make a big change to us. And we know that we change in those situations when we experience a loss, when we fell in love, and perhaps if our partner dies or if our partner leaves us. So we have different fluctuations. And I don't want to be belaboring the point, but we experience those things physically, socially. Maybe when we have a poor mental health, We withdraw, so we experience it and express it socially. Perhaps we express it physically because we can't sleep. Or I'm somebody who, when I'm really stressed, I just want to sleep all the time. I'm an instant sleeper. When traumatic events happen, I can barely stay awake. So everybody has their also, and this is again that connection between mind and body and social and all of these different elements. So think about those things in terms of your self-awareness, because it also helps you kind of track things when you go like, oh, you know what? When I have good mental health, this is what I'm like. When I'm going down on mental health, then, I don't socialize as much. I may not notice it, but you know what? I'm actually not socializing as much, or I'm sleeping much more, I'm sleeping less. So those are all helpful things to learn about ourselves and to be able to track our mental health over time. So even though I did say, there is no blame, there is no shame, there is no judgment on when people have poor mental health or if they have mental illness, there are things that we can do to enhance our mental health, to be aware and to make a change and to improve the quality of our life. And some of these things that we do are things that we want to look at the things that are under our control, because there are a lot of different risk factors that actually affect our mental health and even our risk for mental illness. And that can be our life circumstances. Again, sometimes good things happen to us that makes us feel really good. We got a new job, we're getting all the recognition that enhances that life event, or that life circumstance enhances us. People with poor social economic standing, people with financial and food insecurity. And it's very hard to be upbeat and happy when you have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, if you're going to pay the rent. So social economic aspects, marginalized groups can struggle obviously with mental health and have just because of what that means to be marginalized, perhaps the behavior that they encounter from others, the unkindness that they experience from others, or the impact that that has on their ability to build stability and socioeconomic status in life. So there's a lot of different things that affect us positively and negatively. And even just in the course of our life, if you look at different times in your life, you will see that, when you lose somebody, when you go through grief, when you find somebody, when you find love, when you have a new event happen, when you go from one place to the other, when you relocate, when you connect with your friends, or when you're isolated from your friends. COVID had a huge impact when people were isolated from their social environment, were isolated from their coping mechanisms. So those are all things that affect our mental health. So again, there's no shame or blame. These things happen, and it's a matter of being aware and coping with them. Obviously, all of these other things, other factors are our body. Perhaps our body does things that's not up to us. It doesn't matter how many push-ups we do. If we've got arthritis, we've got arthritis. Lifestyle, how we think. And this is one that I'm going to really focus on a lot, because that's obviously my purview, to be thinking about, to talk about how we think, how we interpret the world, and our social relations. All of these things. Are we lonely? Do we have people we can trust? Do we know that people have our back, or do we feel that it's all on us and that nobody understands us? And again, the social relations is, one of the things that really makes an impact on people in marginalized groups, that you may be, as an educator, may be encountering and wondering, why are these people not functioning? Why are they not taking in the information? Why are they late with assignments? Why are they not, I've explained it 3 times. Why didn't they retain this? Where their cognitive health is affected by these aspects. So when we talk about self-care, and tell me if I'm going too fast, because I just want to make sure that there's time at the end. We're at about 24, 25 minutes. So I want to make sure that we have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So here's the thing. Self-care is really important. It's not selfish. It is self-care. So it's maintaining your health for a lot of different reasons, because you want to be there for other people when they need you, because you want to be healthy when you're old and you have other people that you want to be around. Maybe you want to be there for your grandchildren, because you want to be there for your partner, because you want to be there for your friends. Self-care is not selfish. But it's and one of those things that people often forget. And one of the problems with health self-care is that we often don't think about it until it's urgent. I love to work with the Eisenhower, matrix of time management, and it identifies things that are important and urgent, things that are important and not urgent. It identifies things that are urgent but not important, and things that are neither important nor urgent. And we often miscategorize self-care. It is something that is important, and it is urgent, and perhaps not urgent, but it does require an ongoing investment. And that's what we're going to really talk a bit about today. But what are those ongoing investments that we can make to maintain our mental health and to support it, and through that sustain our resilience as life happens to us?
Renzia, we have a comment from the chat.
Yes.
Very relatable. I relocated about a year ago. I noticed a
Yeah.
drastic change in my energy, confidence, and motivation
Yeah.
for day-to-day tasks. I tried to push
Yeah.
through each day instead of giving myself the time to slow down and embrace all the changes that came with the new
Yeah.
place, new dynamics,
Yeah.
and a new routine.
Yeah.
Taking
and that's
away, taking away the
go ahead.
lesson to be more patient and gentle with myself. And she thanks
Yeah.
you.
I'm very glad that that you went through that experience, but also that you had the insight. So this is a lesson learned. This is how we learn in life, right? Sometimes we make the wrong step, and then we learn from that and we move forward, and we have new tools and new insights that allow us to prevent these things in the future, but also to understand, hey, things happen in life, and I'm not always going to be, 10 on the scale of happiness. And when that happens, it's okay to step back and to do something about that, to deal with the recovery. It's the same, if you have flu, or if you're ill with something, you're supposed to recover. You're supposed to rest and take care of yourself, take your medication, go to your doctor, do whatever you need to do. And we would do that. I hope that everybody does that for their body. That when you're ill, that you actually take the time to recover, that you take your vitamins, that you take your medication, that you take your rest to help yourself to recover. And we need to do the same thing when life hits us with events. And it does. Everybody lives a life, and things happen, you know? And on that note, things happen, and not everything that happens to us is under our control. I love this circle of control. This actually comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So that's a fairly recent kind of, interpretation of it. The thing is, this is, of course, the Serenity Prayer, which has been around, and many people know, for over 150 years. And even Buddhists, 1,000-year-old statements from Buddhists and Buddhist wisdom come down to this. There are a lot of things that you cannot control. And the key is understanding the difference. What can I and can I not control? What can I choose to do? So we need to have a realistic understanding. In order to identify things that are affecting our mental health and the impact, we need to have a realistic understanding about what we can and cannot control. And the example I always give is, I cannot control how much rain is going to happen. I cannot control whether we're going to have sun all winter or not. And whether I'm going to be miserable about that and sit around being sad all day, literally having seasonal affect disorder and sitting around and giving into that and not going out and just kind of being low key and hibernating, or whether I'm going to go out for walks in the forest, even though it's overcast, that is under my control. And whether I decide one way or the other to just sit around and hibernate or go out and force myself to get some exercise, that's not going to make it more sunny or less rainy. So you need to understand that. So I can control one piece, but there's a piece that I can't control. And your decisions around that are going to affect, how things spiral and how they play out and how they affect you and how you relate to those things that you cannot control. So those are some of the things that we want to think about. What's in my circle of control? There are some things that are in the circle of influence. We can't make people be different people. But there are things that we can influence. Maybe we can influence the political climate by going to vote. Maybe we can engage in conversations with family members about certain things. So there are things that we can influence. But the one thing that is always under our control is how we choose to interpret, how we choose to then, based on our interpretation, then act and make decisions and engage with the things that happen to us in life. And this is really, I love when Jenny was talking about this, about our nervous system, because when we interpret things and things are thrown at us, we are always looking for threat. So what that means is that we often drift into the negative because we're looking for threats. We're erring on the side of caution. And so we often drift into negative interpretations to try and stay safe, because we are primed, physically primed to look for threats and to look for safety. But here are some of the things that we do to ourselves that are instinctive things, but just because they're instinctive doesn't mean that we can't challenge them and be aware that we do this. So one of them is overgeneralizing. Yes.
Sorry, just before you get into the traps,
Yeah.
So just to backtrack on a couple of the slides before that, you
Okay.
provided wise advice. I will be retiring in the coming months, and I want to remember to give myself space not to be doing the doing aspect.
Yes.
And then we have a new comment here, and I think maybe this might need a little bit of elaboration. I do agree with the concept of resting when we are physically or mentally ill. Yet sometimes with comorbidities, disease, or reoccurrences of illness, the society expects the individual to push through.
Yes, those are really good comics. One, when we're talking about the do and the drive to do, and we talk about culture, that is a very North American thing. We need to always be acting. We have this belief that we determine our own destiny. We should fight what does Hamlet say? The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that we must fight them and that's going to make a difference. We have to always be active and doing things. And there's a lot of cultures that do not have that belief. And they're equally valid, and it works quite well for them. I come from a Dutch background. In Dutch, they actually have a word for it called niksen, which literally means doing nothing. Sitting there, enjoying yourself, staring at the wall, maybe going to the beach and watching the surf, whatever it is that you do. Niksen. And we find that that's our space for ruminating. It is our space for creative thinking. It is our space for processing and taking time. And so niksen and ruminating, and I'm not talking about ruminating where we're just going over negative scenarios all the time, but ruminating is an important part of our mental health because it opens up our minds. It allows new insights to come to us and new creative ways of thinking to things. So thank you very much for bringing up that point around the doing. And I agree that because of our culture is very much about pushing through, and it's not a strength. It's much harder to sit in place and to recover than it is to push through and not, and that's often not helpful to us. So, and I agree that there is social pressure sometimes, certainly on people that are ill, to go faster than they actually can. So for that, I can validate. Yeah.
Renzia, sorry to interrupt there. Can we just slow down a little bit?
We can. I'm so sorry.
I know you're very
Yeah,
passionate. Absolutely.
I'm passionate, and I'm very conscious of the clock as I've got my stopwatch going. So let me take
So
a
what I
deep
can
breath.
do, Renzia, I will leave anything more for the chat to the end, so you can finish your slides.
Okay, but I do think it's important because other people can see the chat as well. So it's helpful for people to sometimes see other people's observations and to be validated, maybe thoughts that they hadn't had for themselves, or to see that somebody else had the same thought and they're going, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that experiences that way. So, okay, so let me slow down. I apologize for that. So let's talk a bit about some of the things that we do to ourselves in our survival mechanisms that actually are counterproductive to our mental health. One of them is generalizing, and everybody does these different thinking traps. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. There's different things. So overgeneralizing has two aspects. One of them is when we blankets state everything, and we can hear that in our language. If we're using a lot of language that talks about everybody, nobody, everything, always, when we use that kind of language, we're overgeneralizing, and makes that we overlook opportunities, we overlook alternative explanations, we overlook the positives, because it's often, everybody is against me, nothing is going to work, it always fails, I'm always in the wrong lineup in the traffic jam, I'm always at the wrong spot at the wrong time. These kind of statements are not true, but they feel true, but they're not actually. But when we think that and we use that language, so you need to think about your language. Listen to how you narrate your life to yourself. If you use those language, it's detrimental to. The other thing is when we exaggerate, when we use big words, we're not annoyed, we're livid, we're furious. No, we were just annoyed. It was inconvenient. Did it ruin our whole day? Nah, not really. Did it bring the world to an end? Nah, not really. It's just inconvenient and annoying. And so when we use those words, and that's how we narrate our life to ourselves, that puts us in a very negative view of the world, and that undermines our sense of well-being. It undermines our ability to connect with people and to make positive decisions. Obsessing about shoulds and musts. This is one of my favorites. And again, this is one of those things where I come from the Netherlands, and they're a lot more flexible about a lot of these shoulds and shouldn'ts. And so I always get surprised when people are so stuck in shoulds and shouldn'ts, and putting all of their energy into agonizing about what they should be doing, what they must be doing, rather than actually either doing it and feeling better about themselves, or challenging it and saying, who said so? Do I really need to do that? And what would happen if I didn't do that? What are the alternatives? And again, this comes a lot, when you look at other cultures, what you think you should be doing or should not be doing in a particular culture, the culture next door may not believe the same thing at all. They may have very different shoulds and shouldn'ts. And so neither of those cultures have gone up in flame. Everybody finds their way. So you're allowed to challenge those things. Mind reading and jumping to conclusions. I love this one. Here, there's a little story about a man who wants to borrow his neighbor's hammer. So he wants to borrow the hammer, and he's thinking about it. He says, I want to go to, Joe and ask for his hammer. But Joe, he's such a greedy guy, and he's not always nice. And, I don't know if he's going to give me the hammer. He's probably not going to give me the hammer, because I know Joe, he's not going to trust me with the hammer. And the outcome of that process is that he goes to Joe, knocks on the door, and yells at Joe, and you can keep your damn hammer. And that's what we do to ourselves. He didn't test it and try out. He didn't find out if Joe would actually give him the hammer. But we get so wrapped up in the scenario that we build in our own mind that we make decisions and relate to other people based on that scenario without some reality testing. So that's one of the ways that we get in the way of our own mental health and our relationships. Collecting straws and overlooking the positive. An example of this is, I had a wonderful evening with my friends. We talked, we reconnected, we had good food, good company. It was all lovely. And I get to my car at the end of the evening, and woe and behold, there's a parking ticket. Now the whole evening is down the drain. I didn't actually have fun with my friends. The positive mental health impact of sitting with my friends, talking to them, feeling like I had connection and love around me, the good conversation, none of that matters anymore because I got a parking ticket. And how many of you have done that? You made a wonderful meal for your friends, but there was a lump in the gravy. So now the whole meal wasn't wonderful. So these are kind of things that we do. And then blaming. And blaming is one of the things that we do that also undermines, because when we blame other people, the first powerful thing about that is that it disempowers us to make change. If we're going to say that's all Joe's fault, then, well, Joe is Joe, and we can't make Joe any different. But it means that it takes away from us our own power to make decisions on how we relate to things and how we want to handle things. And so it becomes, and it affects our relationships with other people. So those are some of the thinking traps. And so everybody has them. I will not believe somebody who says they don't have them. These are instinctive. I have them. I know I come across them. That ticket story, that's one that I lived. So everybody has those. So I'm asking you, let me go back here. I'm asking you to take a moment to pick your favorite one. What is the one that you use most of the time? Do you use big words? Do you exaggerate? Do you let that ticket overshadow the positive time you had with your friends? Do you like to mind read your partner or your neighbor or your friend's minds and then jump to conclusions about how it's going to be even without testing reality? What are your most favorite thinking traps? And I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. You could put it in the chat if you like, if you want to share with other people. If you want to write it down for yourself, just pick the ones that are mostly yours. And again, these things instinctively happen. The whole point is knowing that this is your tendency. This is how I do things. So everybody picked one? The one that they know they do the most? Yeah. Okay. So now with that, so we've talked a bit about the things that get in our way, but also the things that are under our control. So let's talk a bit about what does that mean if we realize some of these things and we have these insights, and we're maybe a little more compassionate about our own mental health or that of others. What does that mean and how do we change? And so here's what I really love this statement. I know he looks a little, this is Malcolm Gladwell, and he's a brilliant thinker and writer and researcher. So I love this statement because when we get off of the I need to improve, the base premise of that is already putting us on the wrong footing to start off, because it means that there's something wrong with us, and it sets us in many ways up for high pressure about what we need to achieve, and it also sets us up for disappointment about not achieving things. So really what we want to do is we want to take a step back and maybe rethink about how we do things instead of putting it in the framework of improving whatever that might be. And when we rethink,
Renzi,
that
I just
opens up our
wanted to-
creativity. Yes.
I just wanted to bring out one of the comments in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Jumping to conclusions and always being negative first. And then in brackets, I can be a super pessimistic person. Is that already like a preamble to what everything is? Even
That's sometimes
are you
what we
setting
do.
yourself up already? That's
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's what it is.
Well, yes, if you're not able to challenge that, because sometimes it's realistic, right? And sometimes it sets us up because the way that we interpret things is going to affect how we then make decisions and how we act and engage with ourselves, with the people around us, with the events that happen to us. So if we're going to start with pessimism, and everybody has these things, so I don't want people to go like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I'm a pessimist. Everybody has like their tendencies to be pessimistic or more optimistic, have a different temperament. That can be your temperament. It can be, maybe cultural messages that you received or messages from your family, what you saw around you. And maybe you had life experience that often turned out, to disappoint. So you need to realize it, but that there's no shame or blame about where you start. The whole point is realizing, hey, you know what? I really have a tendency to look at things with a negative expectation, to assume that it's not going to work. And the question then is to ask yourself, well, maybe not, right? What would it look like if it was different? Is there something I can do differently to see if it can change or to affect this situation. So it's not about not being pessimistic. It's about knowing that that's your go-to interpretation, and then going and then challenging that and saying, well, is that helpful for me? Is it, when you make a solid statement around, it's not going to come out okay, then you need to always put maybe at the end of statements like that, or maybe not, right? So that is questioning for yourself. I love the word maybe, because it gives us opportunities to look beyond our first statements about things and to open it up to see more of what's there. So it's not about not being pessimistic, it's about knowing it. So I think that's a really good position. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So let's talk about different things that you can implement and that you can start doing to strengthen your mental health on a day-to-day basis. And when we talk about these things about mental health, there's so much more connected to that, right? Because that ongoing investment is also an ongoing investment on your resilience, because life happens and we know that rotten things will throw us off, and that, we don't know what's around the corner. And so part of our resilience is having a buffer so that when negative things hit us, we actually have a foundation to be able to withstand the impact, that we have already practiced techniques that will make us stronger in the onslaught of things that happen to us in life, and that just present themselves to us through other people, through events, through the news, whatever it is that happens that affects us positively and negatively. So we take the positive, we build on those, and we take the negatives in stride as well. So I'm going to walk you through this kind of step by step, and I'm going to ask you to either maybe jot things down, or if you want to do it publicly, put it in the chat. The first thing I'd like to ask you to do, and I'm going to give you a moment to do this, is think about what flourishing looks like for you. And I'm not talking about I would feel ecstatic and I would be feeling love towards all human beings. And I'm talking about when you are flourishing, what are the things that I would be seeing differently about you compared to where you are perhaps now? So you really want to envision that. And it's not about how you're feeling. It's about, when I know, for one thing, when I feel happy, when my mental health is good, I take the time to read the newspaper on Saturday mornings. When I'm not feeling happy, when I'm feeling stressed, I don't think I have the time or the permission or the energy to just sit down and do my Dutch Nixon and enjoy the surf at the lake, or take the time to read a newspaper. So at that moment, when I'm sitting there reading my newspaper in the sunshine with my cup of coffee, I am flourishing. So I want you to think about it in those terms. And again, it's unique for everybody. Not everybody is about reading the newspaper on Saturday morning. You will have your own things, whether it's spending time with your kids, cooking a nice meal, reaching out to people that you haven't been in touch with, sending a note to somebody, whatever it is. What are the things that disappear when you're not flourishing, and the things that you would be picking up and would be easier to lift when you are flourishing? So now I'm going to stop talking and ask you to think about those. And maybe you had some ideas while I was talking to you. I'm going to give you a moment for that. I've got my timer going. Don't overthink it. Just jot some things down, because you can return to this when you get the slides and the booklet, and then you can do it more in depth. But I know that people know these things. And if you just allow yourself, they will pop to the front of your brain. These little things that you've been desiring and longing for, maybe, but that you haven't gotten around to. All right. I hope everybody has some idea of what their flourishing looks like when they're doing well and they've got good mental health. Now, if we put like the ideal situation on the 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, and flourishing and being totally, where you want to be, at 10, and 1 is where you are languishing, where you are really in poor mental health. Where are you most of the time right now? And we're going to get back to that measure later on. So, and again, don't overthink it. Often our first intuitive one is the one that is the truth before we start putting all of our, self-talk in place around, well, is it really, should I be there? Am I allowed to be there? What would my neighbors think if I said that I was at a 4 or a 3? Or, do you think people think I'm silly if I say I'm at an 8? So just your first thought, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to pick a number. All right. I'm going to assume that we now have like we have the top end, we have the 10, and we have our base measure of where we are now most of the time. So now I'd like to talk to you about readiness, because even with that, I am going to just put all of these up. I know I animated them, but let me just put them here. When we decide that we're going to do something differently, when we're going to take action, to rethink things or to make different decisions, there's different places. And where you're coming in, it's an upward spiral in how we are. So you need to decide, and I'm going to ask you again to rate yourself on this. Were you even thinking about mental health or investing in mental health? Is it even something on your mind? Is it something that you were thinking about and thinking, maybe this isn't what I want? Maybe I'm not feeling as good as I would like to. I'd like to do something. Maybe you started thinking about, you know what? I'm not happy the way it is. And I think it would be really good for me if I drink more coffee, go out for walks, whatever it is that you are, fits in your life and your schedule. Are you already doing things? Like a lot of people have already started doing things. Perhaps they're going to yoga, or they've got a breathing app that they're using. So maybe you've already started taking action. The other one is, are you keeping it up? Do you do yoga for 2 days and then you don't go for the next 6 months? That can happen. So are you now actually at the point where you've taken decisions, but you need to keep it up? Perhaps you've fallen completely off the wagon. That's also a totally valid place to be. You've relapsed and it's not happening. You don't think you have the time, the energy, the permission to do what you need to do, even though you had some action plans and you started things. And then maybe you're ready to start again. So we start over again. This is a cycle that we go through when we do these things. And this is why it's important not to be too harsh on yourself, to be kind. Our readiness for change kind of goes, but once we go through that cycle, it's an upward spiral. And we come back to it over and over again. And so we can do that. You can relapse, then you pick yourself up, and then you go, you know what, I'm thinking about it again. I'm going to try something else, or I'm going to try and pick up what I was already doing. And so we go through this, and it's an upward spiral. But you need to kind of know where you are, because if you are just doing things because I'm sitting here telling you how important and wonderful it is to work on your mental health, so what? Who cares what I have to say? You need to be in that spot where you're going, I'm thinking about it. This is something I want. I love talking to people about the what's in it for me. That's the only way that you are going to be able to sustain anything that you decide to put in place and make a change in, or add to your routine, or take out of your routine. So you need to know your what's in it for me. And that can be something for today. Some people do very long term. And so I put an example in there, maybe our doctor told us you need to lose weight, or you need to stop smoking. So we get a health message from somebody. Or maybe our partner told us, I need you to get a grip on this, and I need you to lose weight. that's not a good motivator. Because somebody told us, even though logically we know, it's healthier to lose weight, it's healthy not to smoke, it's good not to antagonize our life partners. We know those things, but that's not them. What you need to then find is, okay, why is this something that would inspire me? And then you think about it, and that's going to be different for different people. For me, losing weight is because I have arthritis in my knee. Losing weight is something that I can invest in because you know what? I love walking in the forest with my dog. And when my knee is out of shape and I'm too heavy, that means that my mobility is impacted. I can't go for city walks. I can't go for forest walks with my dog, and I'm in pain. That's what drives me, the desire to be able to do that. So you need to find your desire that comes from that. So doing it because somebody told you doesn't matter. And that desire can be long-term or short-term. It can be something that you want today, or it is something that you envision for yourself in the future. In the same way that maybe you're saving up for a down payment for a mortgage. That's because you envisioned a long-term goal, and that's what's motivating you to do something every single day or every month when your paycheck comes in to work towards that. So that's one of the things that you want to think about. Georgina, I see you've popped in. I'm almost done. So once you've decided on those things, you need to pick the smallest possible thing that you can do. And here are some things. I don't have to go through all of these things. I think if the story of the jar and the big rocks, we all have big rocks that get in the way, all have things that we must do that are, if we don't do them, they're important and they're urgent. We must do these things. What it's all about in transforming and rethinking and making different decisions is looking for the pebbles, looking for the grains of sand that can fit between the big rocks and fill our days and improve our mental health. So it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter what you decide to do. Every little bit helps. And then there's these little tricks that help. Maybe you're already doing something and you're doing something. I already have to go grocery shopping, but instead of parking right next to the store, I'm going to park at the back of the parking lot. So I'm stacking my commitment, my tiny little commitment to better physical health on top of going to do groceries. The other thing, it's easier to start and replace. Not doing something actually takes a lot of energy. Doing something different instead takes a lot less energy. So these are some things that are self-explanatory when you go through the slides and when you get them. You can start wherever you want. There are a lot of different places. And all of these things, I had that sign in the beginning, that kind of Celtic knot and that ripple effect. So wherever you decide to start, whether it's something about doing something about your physical health, that will help you. If you're dealing something with your sleep or your exercise, you're giving yourself better fuel to be able to withstand irritants, mental irritants and cognitive challenges throughout the day because your body is well fueled and well taken care of. So you can choose wherever you want to start and start putting things in there. I do want to take one moment to talk about the moment of awe. This is where we find our inspiration, and everybody has moments of awe. They found that across the board, people have a moment of awe about every 3 days, every third day, people experience actually a very common experience. And it can be, going for a night walk and seeing the Orion's belt up in the sky. It can be the sun breaking through. It can be see your child doing something or having a student who suddenly gets it and you're inspired. So these are the things that fuel us to keep going as well as we go along. So think about your moments of awe and take energy and inspiration from those. And finally, grab your pebble. This is my last one, I promise you, Georgina. Find your pebble. What is the pebble that you can start with today on that scale of 1 to 10? If you rated yourself a 5, what will bring you to a 5.25 or a 5.5? That's your pebble. And that's the one that you strive for. You don't strive for the end point. You don't jump onto the mountain. What is the first step that you can commit for yourself when you're ready to go and do? So I'm going to leave it at this. You can think about that while we round off for today. and the one last thing is that I'm not going to go through these points, but when we talk about our own mental health, we also perhaps become more aware of other people that may be struggling and want to support them with the things that we've learned about ourselves and the strategies that we've learned. And so when we see other people, just practice kindness. Don't let your fears get in the way, and be kind and listening and supportive to people that may be struggling with mental health as well. So that is, thank you. And thank you very much for everything today. Thank you for putting things in the chat, for sharing. And I hope that you can find a pebble to start working forward.
Thank you, Renzia, for that wonderful presentation. I hope it was very helpful for everybody, and to kind of look into ourselves and help others as well. I just wanted to actually bring one thing. When for my very first MTML presentation, which was in person almost 5 years ago, I opened it up with what you actually just said at the end, and it was, for those that were there might be a couple that are in the audience today, it was be kind and be patient with me today. So it just brought me back there. So thank you so much. We will have questions, and if we can save that towards the end of the day. Right now, we're going to take another break, and then we will welcome Rosanna, who is our second workshop facilitator.
Things will have passed, and you won't have that time would have passed. Mind you, it's never too late to start a self-care routine. However, starting one when you're healthy will make it better for the later years that come, and the other, the emotional and physical challenges that you may encounter later on. So again, you're being preventative. So I have a little, oh, you know what? And I just noticed I'm not sharing my screen. So let me just share. Oops, that's not. Oh dear. Okay, I think I did something wrong here. Share screen. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I thought I was sharing, but I wasn't. Okay, so I have a couple of just two questions or comments or quick assessment for you. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your current level of self-care and well-being? 1 being low and 5 being high. So if you can just, you don't have to share, it's up to you, but if you can just take a moment just to rate yourself on that. 3.5, 2, 3. Okay, so we want to get it to 5, okay? And then what specific challenges or stressors are you currently facing in your life that affect your well-being? And so again, feel free to put them in the chat. If you don't want to share, you don't have to share. It's just for yourself. And I will be providing Georgina with a booklet so that you can have one as well. And these will be in there. Okay. Workload, yeah, that's a big one. Okay. So when we think of self-care, we always think big, right? Like, I don't have an hour to do X, or I don't have half a day to do Y. And, that we feel that we don't have that time available to us. But, we overlook the fact that we don't have to spend all that time on self-care. Self-care can be small. We don't need, all we need maybe is a few minutes a day. But as long as we're consistent, that's the power of that small habit. The consistency will make us reap the benefits more than if we did an hour of yoga a week, or twice a week. So we just need that few minutes a day for our healthy habits. And, you know, we've heard of micro-credentials, I think. I don't know if we've all heard of micro-credentials, and it works in the educational field. So what a micro-credential is it's a short little course or series of courses that are taken over time. And then when you take these courses over time, you get something big at the end. So you might get a bigger certificate. So you're taking these micro courses that add up to something big. And that's the same thing with self-care. If you do a little bit at a time of self-care, eventually the benefits that you will reap are going to be huge. So, you know, small things eventually lead to big things. Okay. And in this case, you'll actually be taking care of yourself and you will score higher. So if you know, the previous page that I showed you, if you were at a 2 or a 3, you will, after doing some self-care, you will be scoring much higher. Okay. And somebody in the chat said that, you know, you take too much on and you're prioritizing everyone else's needs. And I'm going to talk about that later on for sure. So let's talk about 3 things. I mean, there are a ton of things that you can do on a daily basis that don't take too long. And, you know, you can spend anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. And that's all that you need to start off your self-care routine. You don't have to incorporate all the things, you know, but you may find that, you know, you'll do one thing at a time, one different thing at a time. And then what you're going to find is that you might actually blend these things together. So for example, when you're doing a meditation, you can do your breathing. When you're doing Qigong, you can actually go into meditative state. So it's almost like you're doing 2 tasks, 2 routines at the same time. And the nice thing about these is that you can do them at home or you can do them at the office. You can even incorporate them into your meetings. You know, what's to say that you can't start off a meeting with 3 minutes or 2 minutes of a breathing exercise or 2 minutes of a meditation, okay? Or do them while you're on your break, okay? So these are things that you can do, and I'm going to go through them. We're going to actually do each one of these things throughout this presentation, okay? So actually, let's start with breathing. And you're probably thinking, okay, I'm breathing right now. Why do I need a little, you know, self-care routine for breathing? But breathing, when we do it constantly, we don't breathe properly. Okay, so this breathing exercise that I'm going to show you is called the relaxation response. And it was coined by a Dr. Herbert Benson, who was a cardiologist, and eventually he brought spirituality and healing into his practice. And the relaxation response is the ability to encourage your body to release chemicals and brain signals that make your muscles and organs slow down, which then in turn increases your blood flow to the brain. So Dr. Benson has a book out and it's called The Relaxation Response. And in that book, he explains all the scientific benefits of this relaxation, which if it's practiced regularly can be so effective for a wide range of stress-related disorders. And we know that stress is the #1 killer. We all have stress in our life, but you know, it's how we handle it, how our body processes that stress that really determines what it's doing to our bodies. And so according to Dr. Benson, the best time to do this relaxation therapy is first thing in the morning, between 10 and 20 minutes. Now, I know that may be too long for a lot of you, but I feel that, you know what, you can practice this for 3 minutes, you know, twice a day maybe, and, you know, you'll still have benefits from it. So let's practice this for 3 minutes. All right. So whoever is on your computer doing emails during my presentation, I want you to stop. All right. So let's sit in a comfortable position and close your eyes. And I'm just going to put my timer on so that I don't take too much time. So let's do it for 2 minutes and see how it goes. Okay. So sit in a comfortable position and close your eyes. Relax all your muscles, beginning at your feet, all the way up to your face. And relax your tongue. Breathe through your nose, becoming aware of your breathing. And as you breathe out, say the word one silently to yourself. So breathe in, and as you're breathing out, say one. And repeat this. Breathe in, say one. Continue breathing. If you are distracted by any thoughts, just ignore them and return to repeating the word one. And gently open your eyes. How did that feel? And if this is new to you, you're going to get 1,000 things coming in your mind. But that's okay, because as they come in, you're going to not dwell on them, and you're just going to repeat that word. And you can find any word. You don't have to use the word one, but it should be a word with no meaning or association. And that way you're avoiding that unnecessary stimulation. Okay. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention is that I asked you to relax your tongue. And according to Dr. Benson, when you relax your tongue, your thoughts will disappear. Okay. So when you do this, maybe if this was your first time, you're going to have that active mind and you may not be as relaxed. But once you do it over time, you will get to that point. Okay. And so again, you can practice this for 3 to 5 minutes. 10 minutes is ideal, but sometimes we don't have that much time. So we'll just do it for a short period of time. So now we're going to talk about resilience. And I know that Rencia talked about resilience in her presentation, but in the context of self-care, it helps to overcome the challenges, setbacks, and maintain that positive outlook. And so resilience really is that ability to bounce back from challenges and adversity. And we all have challenges and adversity in our life that we're going through. So self-care really plays a crucial role in that whole process by providing you with the emotional strength, coping mechanisms, and support systems necessary to navigate all of that. And so when we engage in self-care activities such as exercise and meditation and practicing gratitude, for example, that can help you build the resilience by fostering that mental and emotional well-being. So it in turn really helps you to tackle those challenges. And so again, by doing these small things consistently, you will reap those benefits. So when we have those setbacks, let's look at those setbacks not as mistakes or, things that we want to regret that we did, but let's look at them as opportunities for growth, because that is a key aspect of resilience. And so self-care will help you cultivate that mindset. So tips for building resilience in everyday life. You want to establish that self-care routine. You want to incorporate self-care activities into your daily life, so such as the meditation, the Qigong, and the relaxation response that we just did. You want to surround yourself by friends and family who are going to support and encourage you. If any of your friends or your family are toxic to you, don't associate with them. I know it's hard because sometimes, they are family and we can't ignore our family all the time, but the less you can interact with them, the better. You want to surround yourself with people who will encourage you and who will support you during those tough times. You want to focus on the positive aspects of your life. We all have, good things and bad things in our life. But when we focus on the bad things of our life, guess what? What you focus on grows more and more. So let's focus on what we're grateful for. And even if they're very tiny, tiny things. Okay. Set realistic goals. And Renzia talked about setting goals. So, you want to set the goals, but, set them in manageable steps. You may have a huge goal and, you may not reach that huge goal, but if you, in the way that you want or the time that you want, but if you break up that larger goal into manageable steps and celebrate your progress along the way, it'll motivate you to get closer to that bigger goal. You want to be kind to yourself. Practice self-compassion, especially during these difficult times. And, we treat others, our friends, our colleagues even, with kindness and understanding. But then when we have to do that to ourselves, for some reason we don't. So treat yourself with that same kindness and understanding that you would treat others. Okay. Resilience also involves accepting that there are certain things that, are beyond our control. And, I know that we talked about that earlier on. So self-care practices such as even mindfulness or meditation, relaxation techniques, they can help you find that inner peace, allowing you to let go of worry and, and stop stressing about those things that are beyond your control. When self-practice care starts to play a crucial role in maintaining a positive outlook during those tough times, your emotional resilience is going to increase, and your coping skills necessary to navigate those challenges effectively are also going to increase. So really engaging in those self-care activities will promote optimism and, engage in activities maybe that will bring you joy. So, they will promote optimism, they will promote happiness, and they will promote a sense of joy and peace, even in the face of adversity. So, we can be positive, we can have a healthy mindset even when things aren't going well. Because it's easy when things are going well to, to be happy and to be joyful. And how do we do that when things aren't going that well for us? Okay. So we talked a little bit about limiting beliefs, and those can act as invisible barriers that hinder that personal development. And these beliefs are often ingrained in us through our past experiences or our societal norms. And they can include things as, I'm not good enough, or success is only for others. I can't be successful, or change is too difficult. I'm such and such an age and I can't change, the way I do things. Or as Renzia spoke about, the should or shouldn'ts. So these are all things that are in our mind, and these are things that maybe we were taught as a child, and they really prevent us from reaching our full potential. So it's how do you foster that self-doubt, that fear of failure, and resistance to change? And overcoming those limiting beliefs really requires you to face all of those beliefs and get rid of them. Replace those limiting beliefs with new ones. And it could be as easy as that. And so by practicing self-awareness and self-reflection through the meditation, through journaling, and these are all self-care tips, by the way. Okay, so you can really uncover negative thought patterns and beliefs that are holding you back. And you can then develop strategies to challenge and reframe all of your limiting beliefs. And like I said, replace them with something new. Replace them with more empowering and constructive perspectives. And, self-care, emotional health, physical health, but let's talk about emotional health. It's not easy, just like physical health isn't easy. It takes work. But, we're more inclined to go to the gym and diet to fit into that dress that we have to wear to the wedding next month than we are to really helping our emotional well-being. And so I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say that it's easy. It's not. It's work. But you know what? It's really good work, and it's to your benefit. So, even just small things as affirmations, self-care rituals, and surrounding yourself with positive influences can really help you develop a more compassionate and empowering self-perception. And that's all part of this healing journey. It's all part of your growth. Another thing that, we have is this inner voice. And I don't know about your inner voice, but my inner voice is the worst critic because it's always putting me down. But you know what? Challenge your inner critic when it puts you down, when it says things about you that aren't true. Okay? Challenge it. Ask it. Well, how do you know this is true? Okay? Replace those negative inner thoughts with more positive and constructive replacements. Now, positive thinking isn't going to make everything go away. So these positive thoughts that we're going to have isn't going to make anything go away, really, but it is going to lower depression rates. It's going to lower your level of distress and pain. And the challenges are going to be there regardless, right? Remember, we are not in control of a lot of things. So, whether you look at something in a negative way or in a positive way, it's been shown that better decisions are made when one has a better or a positive attitude. And so it probably takes the same amount of energy to look at something in a negative way or in a positive way. And again, the positive way isn't going to make everything okay, but it's going to help you cope that much better. Okay. I think I want to take this time now to do a little meditation, because we talked about gratitude and how, part of that self-care ritual includes gratitude and includes maybe journaling on what you're grateful for. Even in the midst of adversity and when we have so many negative things affecting us or they're out there in the world. But if you can find that one little bit of thing that you're grateful for, will make a huge difference. So I'd like to take this time. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to find my very short meditation. So I just want to show you also that, meditating doesn't have to be, hours and hours. And I may have, let me just see here. All right. Because I think, meditating gets a bad rep. It has a bad reputation because, people think, oh, I don't know how to meditate, or meditation takes too long. But the actual fact is that, meditation doesn't have to take long. Meditation isn't something that you have to learn. You can meditate however you want. There's so many types and forms of meditation. And so, and some people say, well, I can't meditate because my mind is going a mile a minute. But the more you meditate, the more relaxed and clear your mind will become. So it's something that, you have to do over and over again until you feel comfortable with it. And, I always say, so if a thought comes into your mind, just put it aside. Consciously say, I'm going to get to that later. Right now I'm meditating. I want to relax. Okay. And meditation is a really good form of relaxation. And you can meditate silently. You can meditate with music. You can meditate with a guided meditation. It all depends. Try various ones out and see what really resonates with you and what you like. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop my video and we are going to take a moment to sit comfortably again. And I'm choosing to not do this with music. I'm just going to guide you with it. So I want you to take a full breath in through the nose and sit up a little taller. And as you exhale through the nose, release those shoulders. Take a few moments with attention to your breath, settling into a neutral, upright posture. Allow your belly to soften and shift your shoulders back ever so slightly. And lower the chin so that your back is neutral and long. And with awareness of your breath and posture, begin to intentionally generate a deep sensation of gratitude for the breath itself. As you watch and breathe, notice your breath moving in and out through your nose, remembering how precious this one breath is, and then the next one too. Invite the spaciousness of awe and wonder as you sit with the next 3 to 5 cycles of breath. 1, 2, and 3. Continuing to breathe in and out. And now draw your attention to your heart. You can even place your hand on your heart. Feel the heartbeat beat. Perhaps in the quiet you can hear it. You're still aware of your breath, but noticing and listening to your heartbeat. Inviting in the awareness of the miracle of the heartbeat. Notice the miracle of the heartbeat and the breath for the next 3 cycles of breath. 1, 2, and 3. And still aware of the breath and the heartbeat, draw awareness to the form of your human body. You're here, you're functioning, you're breathing, your heart is beating. Notice whatever it is that arises when we notice the unique fortune of our human birth. Here in this human body, you have everything you need to awaken. You have everything you need to find happiness, contentment, and joy within. There is infinite capacity within you. Infinite capacity for awareness and gratitude. Breathe, breathing, heart beating. A mind that can notice, understand, feel, and discern. A mind whose capacity for awareness, understanding, and growth is infinite. A mind whose capacity for noticing is true nature is right here, right now, in your hands. So put a little smile on your face. Take another deep breath in and open your eyes. All right, so hopefully everybody feels a little calmer. And, it didn't take that long to do that short meditation. Okay. All right. So let's continue and let's talk about time, because that seems to be the biggest issue when we think about self-care, is how much time do I need? And as I showed you with the couple of self-care routines, you don't need that much time. And time is a funny thing, because we think that we don't have time, but then when something tragic happens, and I hate to be morbid, but it's happened to me, and I'm sure it has happened to a lot of people. When there's a death in the family, do we ever say, oh, I don't have time to go to the visitation, or I don't have time to go to that funeral? No, we make the time, right? So, I remember my grandmother saying to me, if you want to make time, you can make time. Okay, you make time for the things that you want to make time for. And it's true. And I've been there, and I'm sure you have been there, where you are choosing what to spend your time on. So I'm going to talk about time management a little bit, because it really is important to create that space for self-care. And, we always say that time is scarce, and how do we find time? And so, if efficient time management really involves prioritizing your tasks and activities to maximize the productivity and achieve your goals. And one of your goals could be self-care. You want to create that time, because it's really essential that you create or you allocate that time for activities that's going to promote your well-being and prevent the burnout. So remember, we want to be preventative here. We don't want to wait till the last minute to start these self-care routines. Okay, it's not too late, but it may take you longer to recuperate. Okay, by doing this on a daily basis, you really can replenish your energy, reduce stress, and enhance your overall productivity. Okay, so you know, we have to really be intentional on aligning our goals with our well-being. And so if that means identifying self-care practices that are most beneficial for your physical, mental, and emotional health and making them a priority in your schedule, you have to fit them in. My doctor always used to say to me, because I always complained that I didn't have time to exercise. And she said, Rosanna, in your day timer, with all your other meetings that you're putting in your day timer, schedule self-care, schedule exercise, because that's the way that you're going to do it. Okay. You know, maybe we have to batch our tasks. We have to group things, similar tasks together so that we don't go from one place to another. You know, and maybe consciously we have to block time for answering emails or making phone calls. We're so attached to our email that we're constantly, you know, either sending, reading, responding to emails. And I remember that was the first thing after I retired. That was actually the first thing to get used to because I didn't hear that ding all the time coming in. And I kept looking at my phone, you know, expecting to look at emails, but they disappeared, right? So you want to maybe put the phone on mute and do that, you know, take half an hour to do all that. You want to set boundaries. So I think somebody in the chat said that they're doing everything for everybody else. Well, set those boundaries. Try, you know, it's your time and you have to protect your time. And so when we do things for other people, what are we? We're resentful. And so when we do things for other people that we're, you know, putting our own self on the back burner for, they could probably see that we're resentful. And that's not good for relationship building, and that's not good for either party. So setting boundaries, I know, is very hard, but by practicing that no word a little bit at a time, before you know it, you're going to be a pro at setting those healthy boundaries and at not doing everything for everybody at a drop of a hat. Planning and prioritizing, you know, look at your to-do list, look at your calendars. I talked about blocking time in your calendars, you know, which really does help a lot. Limit those distractions from technology. Set boundaries around the screen time because sometimes that will take a lot of time and it's wasteful time. Okay, so you want to consider scheduling. I'm not saying not to look at social media at all, but schedule it. I think sometimes we're in this real-time world where we have to be available to everybody and anybody. And as things come up on our social media, we have to look at it, but we don't. It's going to be there later on when we have some time to spend on it. So let's pick and choose what's really important to us. I have another little question here. So what are your time waster habits? So I call these, you know, these bad habits that we have, like watching too much TV maybe, or again, responding to emails when you're not even at work, or scrolling on social media. Procrastination is a huge bad habit. Working without a plan. Thinking about past traumas, negative thoughts, those are bad habits. And so the trick here is to take your bad habit and replace it with a new self-care healthy habit. Okay, and again, I am going to send a booklet along that has more information and more room for you to do that. But if you want to just, I'm sure, you know, if you have a healthy habit that you're wasting time on, just jot it down really quickly and you don't have to share that. So I know that Rencia talked about the things that we can control and the things that we can't. So I can't control what others think of me. I can't control how to help others. I can't control other people's motives, etc. But I can control my attitude, the way I think, okay, and how I am going to take care of myself, my own productivity. Again, the serenity prayer is something that I always go to because I am always faced with situations that I tend to look at and it gets me down, but I can't control those situations. So I like to have this prayer handy all the time. And, you know, thinking about those things that you can't control. Again, this prayer is always, it always reminds me that, you know what, I'm not in control. We are not in control, but we can control, like I said, the way our attitude towards things, our mindset. Okay, so let's control those things. So I want to take, if I can take a couple of minutes, I want to show you Qigong, just a couple of moves that you can do, you know, that will take maybe 2 minutes to do, that will really help re-energize your body. And so let me just go back to, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Qigong, but you know, it's sort of, I always describe it as a crossover between Tai Chi and yoga. And so I stumbled across it when I was doing my daily routine Google's research, and Qigong was developed in China thousands of years ago, and it was part of Chinese traditional medicine. And so the exercises that I'm going to show you really optimize the energy within the body, the mind, and the spirit. And it really improves and maintains health and well-being. So again, you don't have to spend hours doing Qigong. You can, you know, just practice a few minutes at a day, and because it is so beneficial. I do recommend, though, that you do find, or I'm going to provide resources of Qigong videos that I like to practice with. Some of them are 20 minutes, some of them are half an hour. But once you do them, then you'll remember the routines, and you can pick and choose which ones you'd like to do just for a couple of minutes at a time, okay, until you get that extra time. So again, I'll stop sharing. And okay, so you have to stand for this one. So I am going to, let me just see if okay. And I'm going to move back. So everybody, if you can stand. And just feet wide apart, you know, hip wide apart. Just relax your shoulders. I always tend to keep my shoulders up to my ears, and I have to consciously push them down. Okay, so we're going to just gently turn and with our hands knock on our front belly and our lower back. So you're just going to turn, and this is called knocking on the door of life. Okay, so you're just going to turn from one side to the other, and you can even turn your head from one side to the other while you're doing this. And this is a great exercise for your lower back and for your abdomen. And you can take deep breaths while you're doing that. And then you're going to take one arm and knock on your shoulder pressure point. And then you're gonna tap your shoulder. And then you're gonna tap your lower back and your abdomen again, just a few more times. All right, then you're gonna stop. And then the next exercise is called a bouncing exercise. So you're going to stand tall, knees a little bent, and you're just going to bounce. Bounce up and down. And this is a really good exercise to help release any negative energies that are trapped in your body. And it's also good for the lymph system. Sometimes when we keep those traumas, those childhood traumas, those past events, they get stuck in our body. And we just want to release and let the energy flow. And then you can raise your arms, hands limp, and just bounce. In deep breaths. And just feel that energy flowing all through your body. No barriers, no blockages. And hands down. You can stop the bouncing and just bring your hands together and apart and together. And you will probably, hopefully, feel that energy. That calm energy. And take another deep breath in. And you can have a seat again. So how did that feel? Okay, and it didn't even take that long, right? So the bouncing might be a little hard to get used to, but once you do it, it's such a, it leaves you just feeling so refreshed and energized. All right, so I'm just gonna, whoops. All right, let me just, sorry, I have to share and can't find the screen. All right, so we talked about, you know, our inner critic, that inner voice that's always putting us down. And so that makes us feel really hard on ourselves. And, you know, we have to learn how to be compassionate to ourselves and how to treat us the way that we would treat our best friend. And so I have this Hawaiian prayer. It's a practice that is asking for forgiveness, and it's expressing attitude and expressing love to yourself. Because let's face it, when was the last time that you told yourself that you love you? There are so many things that we can do. We can look in the mirror and say, I love you. And, it's not selfish, because when we love ourselves, we emanate that to everybody else. So we have better relationships with everybody else. When we're compassionate with ourselves, we have compassion for others as well. And so overall, it really helps our relationships. And the most important one, it helps the relationship with ourselves. So I want to take a moment before we end this presentation, the session. I want you to sit up again. I want you to intertwine your fingers, and I want you to place your hands on your heart. Take a deep breath and close your eyes and repeat after me. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And that didn't take very long. So the next time, you're feeling down about yourself, you feel that you made a mistake, or you feel that you're not paying that much attention to yourself, anything that, you're feeling, you're blaming yourself for, do this little prayer. And you can do it as many times. And I would actually make it into my self-care routine, because we need to forgive ourselves. We need to, take care of ourselves. It's not selfish. If we want to take care of others, we have to take care of ourselves first. And I always like to use the analogy of flying. When you fly, the flight attendant always says, be sure to put the mask on yourself before you help others. And that is worth, a lot. So it's not only in the airplane where we have to do that. We have to do that on a daily basis. And it's not going to happen overnight. These habits, these healthy boundaries are they can be hard to create, especially if you've done the same old for many, many years, but it can be done one step at a time. So be kind to yourself. And with that, thank you so much for having me. I wish you well on your healing journey, and hope that you're going to incorporate some of these micro healthy habits into your daily routine. And like I said, there are so many, that you can incorporate. You can cut them down. So even if it's an hour meditation, cut it down to 2 minutes. And thank you so much again.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Rosanna, for that interactive and a little bit of physical movement to get that stagnant energies out, and those helpful hits and strategies. Thank you. This has been an amazing forum so far. So we're at the end of our workshops, and we will go till 1. This is the part where if anybody has any questions, we have, I believe, all 3 still on the line. So Rosanna, Granzia, and Jenny. If we have any questions from the audience, we will take them now. Concerns, questions, comments? Just please raise your hand.
Sorry, I have a question. This is Embrain.
I am ready.
So thank you for the wonderful day. So I'm just thinking from the point of view of literacy practitioners who are dealing with a workload of work, could be admin, teaching, how would they deal with their self-care if they're overloaded with work? How do they take out that time and just some tips on what they should do.
Yeah, so okay, so I'm gathering that there are some practitioners who or teachers as well in the group. And so with the teachers, you can actually incorporate self-care in the classroom. You know, take 5 minutes with your class and do a meditation. And or you know, do a little bit of Qigong or something, whatever, you know, you feel is that you'd like to do, whatever resonates with you. Even journaling, because you know, again, it's that time commitment. It's that blockage that we don't have time. But when we really want to make time, we can make time. So, you know, I know workload is a big issue. Are you taking it home? Are there things that, you know, if you are taking it home, are there things that you might be talking to your manager about? And I've been there. So I know I was, you know, in the educational field, and I know how busy and how everything gets piled on to individual people. But again, it's finding that 5 minutes consistently that will help you manage that workload. Not manage the workload, but manage how you are managing the workload. Okay, does that make sense? Because sometimes it's our attitude. So if we go with the attitude that, oh, you know what, I have a full day tomorrow, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I don't have time for anything, that keeps growing, that mindset keeps growing. And so when you're presented with that heavy workload, you're going to be resentful, and you're going to maybe not, I guess, handle it the way you would handle it if you went in there with I know that this is going to be my workload. I know I'm going to have so many things to do. I might not get a break during the day. However, let me see if I can incorporate it somehow during my day. And again, you know, if you're in a meeting, can you say, let's just stop for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. Let's just do a breathing exercise so that we can regroup and feel a bit. Rencia, do you have any?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, because there's always time to breathe. There's always time to look at the wall for 2 seconds or look at an inspiring picture. But one of the things that people also need to understand is that if you don't take those breaks, your work actually takes longer. It's harder to perform. So if you're not refueling, if you're not getting up to stretch, if you're, you know, you're not comfortable, if you're not eating properly and taking the time to do those things, your workload actually grows because your productivity goes down. And there's lots and lots of research that talks about, you know, not multitasking, which is very counterproductive, about working where you work very intense for a period of time and then take less time. The highest productivity is people that take breaks. This is the Pomodoro method. And so that, you know, there's a lot of research from different places that shows that if you take those breaks, you're actually going to get through your work faster.
I'd also like to add a thought that onto these pieces, that it's also, I think, important that we don't think it's all about ourselves and what we must do differently. And we do also look at the conditions, at the environment, and use some of our fierce energy to see where there are possibilities for change outside ourselves. I think there's a lot of gain by some balance of looking, what can I change? And also, who can I ally with? Who else might help to change the overall conditions? How can we create a culture in our workplace that really recognizes the whole range? So I just want to add that in, always thinking about conditions, the connections with others as well as ourselves, and the balancing backwards and forwards between the two can really make a difference, I think, and shift some of that. Too easily we can go to self-blame alongside self-care. I should just stretch better. And I want to really invite us to shift from that.
Yeah. It's controlling those things that we can control, and we can't control our workload. Sometimes, you know. So.
Thank you. Another question that came through is, how do we know if we're on the progress where there's happiness, contentment, and joy, like on the spectrum where of the process of getting that healing? Is there a difference? Being happy, content, and joy?
I'm going to deep dive in. I think that's a beautiful question because I think it really draws us to notice ourselves. Rosanna, you talked about wonder, or maybe it was Resnia, but I know there was a mention of wonder earlier, and I think that really noticing when we feel that little sense of joy, that sense of feeling very sort of fully alive, that is the space, I think, where we get to imagine the next step. And it is when we're feeling really numbed or angrily activated, it's hard to find the place even of compassion for ourselves, let alone for anyone else. So I do think it is whatever gives us a chance to just settle enough to be able to experience our own body, mind, feelings, being, and then know where, even if things are really difficult, we're also feeling just these moments of joy in the sunshine or in a interaction.
And I think it is unique to everybody what defines that, what it looks like, right? So what are your moments of joy? Is it a piece of music? Is it an image? Is it a taste, a piece of chocolate cake? So I think everybody has their unique indicators of where they are and what defines joy and health for them. I think contentment is one that's often underrated because it doesn't mean complacency, but just being happy where you are. You don't have to be having peak experiences all the time. You can just be happy where you are and be in a good place. And that's also very valuable.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, happiness isn't out there. Happiness starts in here. So when you're happy with yourself and you accept yourself for who you are, then you will find that happiness, and that joy.
Thank you. Jason, you had your hand up.
Yeah, my question's for Jenny. I'm slowly reading through your book, Too Scared to Learn, and really enjoying it. During your presentation, you had mentioned that nothing is bad or good. It serves us in the moment. And on one hand, I think this is like a very mentally healthy way of thinking, kind of fosters resilience. On the other hand, I think it could be like an insensitive thing to say if, for example, if someone just experienced trauma. And so I'm wondering first if I misunderstood any part. And then the second part is more so if there's some nuance or some qualifying comments there, which I'm guessing, but curious to hear you elaborate there.
Well, I'm glad you asked about that because, yes, I am absolutely not wanting to say that any mistreatment of any form is okay. I think there are, minute by minute, enormous range of ways that any of us can be mistreated, and in a racist, sexist, homophobic, ageist, ableist society where the systems themselves create violences, I am absolutely not wanting to say any of that is okay. What is important to me, though, is really recognizing that how we respond to those, what our system does as we engage with and try to move forward in the face of the mistreatment of ourselves and of our ancestors. And, for many people going back many generations, the harm, the damage that is done can really carry on. And so I'm wanting to say that the ways that we survive are what was necessary to stay alive in the moment. And the ways that shapes how we respond in every continuing moment is also, it is keeping us alive. And then absolutely, as we notice ourselves just being caught and caught and caught again, then maybe we can find just that tiny spaciousness to open to just a little bit of harm reduction, just a little bit of shifting, where we can see that reaction. Maybe I'm angry all the time. I noticed when I was very caught a while back, I was way more angry than usual. I couldn't shift it easily. And yet there were moments I could shift it. There were moments when I noticed it, I could see what it was coming out of, and I could also see what sorts of actions shifted. And it seems to me it's often surprising actions. In that case, I won't go into the whole story, but I found that when I started doing strong physical tasks for other people, I felt less caught in my childhood of being unable to control the environment and more able to shift. So it can be really surprising things, I think, that allow shift. It's not, oh, I shouldn't be angry. It's, oh, look, when I start digging and laying a path for a neighbor and friend, my anger shifts. And so it's that sense of when we start from what's wrong, I think we push against it and we push back almost equally. Whereas when we say, it's serving me, where is the space that I can find? Then we find ways to change the environment and backwards and forwards between ourselves and the environment and our connections with others, and things shift. Does that answer you fully? Feel free to add another supplemental question if that doesn't quite get at what you meant.
I might just have to sit with that a little bit longer, but yeah, thank you for responding.
Feel free to follow up in the future. I'm easily found on the online.
We have a poll before you leave, just a reminder to complete the poll. We have Tracy in the chat stating, oh, I went too quickly. Tracy. Sorry, they're scrolling. Imagine a world where we loved and cared about ourselves and others versus hatreds and war. It would be wonderful. Yes.
I want to dive in response to that just very briefly. I really feel that so much of the violence in this world is because we lead with fear, we lead with judgment, rather than with love for ourselves and for others. And I connect that too to the nervous system and the way that the nervous system, in trying to keep us safe, also sets us up when we're in those activate states to see others as enemies. And we see that just so much in the world today.
So another piece. I loved having an opportunity to take time to relearn many things that I have forgotten to practice since COVID. Really, truly helpful. Anyone else would like to have thoughts or for our presenters? Okay, well, a resource booklet will be coming out with what was presented today. And for my part, I would just like to say thank you very much. All three presenters, Rosanna, Rancia, and Jenny, our keynote speaker. For the audience, for participating, for Kate and Erin for our interpretation. An overall beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all go well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you for your interpretations.
Pleasure.
This was wonderful. Whew.
Thank you, Jenny. I think you're the only one, I think the
Ah,
other two
yes.
left.
Thank you, both of you, for hosting this event. It was very interesting. What were you thinking about pamphlet and materials and so on following up while I
No,
have
so
you?
if you have any resources, we could even put in your resources. So we usually create a booklet.
Okay, great, great.
Just and then we just
I'll edit the slides to see what sort of extra words I need for them to stand a little bit more alone and send them to you.
okay. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank
you
you.
So much, Jenny. Enjoy the
Take
rest of
care.
the
Have a good
sunny
weekend,
day
both of you. I'm sorry, what did you say, Georgie?
and the rest of the sunshine.
Thank you, you too. Go well.
You too.
Take care.
Bye. Very nice.
Yeah, it was actually. I mean, I loved Rosanna's was different, but I loved even Renzia's.
I
It was
think they
so
were
good.
all different, but yeah, they were yeah, they were all very good, you know, the physical one and got people up and moving. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Oh,
good
very
job.
good. Very nice job. Okay. I'm done for today, Ambry, because I work Monday, as you know, so I'm
Yeah, yeah.
taking,
So so just a tip, when you make your to-do list for next week, always take a look at the action plan because there are some things assigned to you. Include that in that so that you're also updated about what needs to be done. Okay? Okay, have a
Okay.
nice weekend.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too. Okay, bye.